meeting, and we will be covering fiscal matters today. And we're going to jump right in with our traditional disclaimer. So this presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number ED, ESE 15-A-0015/0006 with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned in this publication is intended or should be inferred. And now that you are officially disclaimed for the day, I'm going to turn it over to Angela to introduce the Office of Indian Education team.
Good morning or afternoon, depending on where everybody is. Thank you so much for making it to today's conversation. I do hope at some point during our presentation today, or our talk, that our new director, Angeline Booley, will be able to join us. We were both sort of in a prior meeting just now, and she might be jumping to others. She's in the middle of sort of baptism by fire, right? Getting immersed here at the department. So she may or may not join us today. My colleague Kimberly Smith has been part of this work. She also will not be here today with us, but just know that she's been instrumental in helping us sort of formulate today's conversation. And me, Angela, your current program officer. And as you all know, I've been working on an ongoing basis with our colleagues at Synergy, and we know and appreciate probably just as much, if not more than you do, their time and efforts to ensure that we continue to have this communication link with you. And frankly, I'm hoping today we can make sure that we're here to answer any questions that you guys might have, and just to make sure that we're all on the same page around fiscal management for the purposes of informing non-competitive continuation grants and those awards that will happen over the course of the next few months. Okay, thanks, Sarah.
So now we'll go over and introduce our Synergy team. So I'm Sarah Brightwell. I think I know almost all of you that are on the phone and have met you in person. We also have Kathleen Bethke on today, our project director. She's a little under the weather, so she's going to stay quiet throughout, but she is here. Sherry Lover, our corporate monitor, who was not able to join us today. Online, we do have Miranda Cairns, our research and evaluation lead, and Sarah Whitehead, our project coordinator, who you get lots of fun emails from all the time, and just to keep you on your toes with the two Sarahs. And then Charlotte Soriano, our other project coordinator, who was not able to join today. So just a quick reminder of where everybody is coming from, because now we're going to move over to doing some grantee welcomes, particularly because some of you have different members of your team on than typically join our webinar. So we want to make sure and know who's here with us today. So I'm actually going to stop sharing so we can see each other for those of us who are on camera. And if you are not on camera and you have a camera ability and you're trying to figure out how in the world to turn that on, down at the bottom of your screen, there should be a row of icons. The furthest to the left is your microphone, and it should say mute, unmute, and you can toggle on and off your ability to speak. And then next to that is one that looks like a little video camera, and that's how you can toggle on and off your picture to be able to show us your face so we can have as much of a face-to-face chat as possible. So we're going to go through the grantees, and if you could just introduce yourself and anybody from your team that is joining you today, we'd appreciate it. So we're just going to go in grantee alphabetical order and kick off with Daisy in Albuquerque.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Daisy Thompson, and I am one of the grantees, and we are working on the Zuni language and also the Navajo language for grades, I believe it's 3rd through 8th grade. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we will move over to Anchorage.
There we are.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Brandon Locke. I'm actually at home sick today, but I promised my team that I would join I'm not sure exactly who in my office is on this call with us, but we are implementing a UPIC immersion program at the elementary level, and we are wrapping up our first year of kindergarten and gearing up for another group of kindergartners, and then our current group is moving to first grade.
Wonderful. And I could be wrong, but I think you have Matthew and Katrinka on from your office. There may be others. If there is anyone else that I've missed, feel free to unmute and holler in.
So Katrinka is the admin assistant that works directly with me in the teaching and learning department and is helping me support this grant. And Matthew is a specialist down in the finance office.
Great, we're glad everyone from the team is able to join. All right, let's go over to Ray. Not sure if Nicole's been able to connect just yet. So let's move over and we'll actually skip a little and go to San Carlos, Dorina.
Hear me, Sarah?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dorina Thompson. I'm from San Carlos, Arizona, and we're working with 3 Head Start classroom, immersion classrooms, as well as 1 kindergarten classroom in our local San Carlos Unified School District. Working on creating a first grade immersion class beginning fall of 2019.
Perfect. And is there anyone else from your team on that you know of?
I don't see anybody, so.
Okay, perfect. That's fine. I just don't want to leave anybody out.
No.
And then we will skip over to Yukon and Gina.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gina Harinko, and I'm overseeing our program. And we are serving K through 12th grade, and we're developing workbooks and basically developing a curriculum for Koyakan Athabaskan. And I think I'm the only one on for my team.
No problem. All right, and then just double checking because some of these don't necessarily have your name per se. Is there anyone from Oglala on yet? All right, and what about from Lakudare? All right, so those may be still joining. Let's see. We do have a couple of numbers, and I'll send you private messages and get you introduced shortly, but we'll go ahead and jump back into the content. All right, so we had a few slides to introduce you, and I'm going to turn it over to Angela to discuss a bit more about our fiscal matters for the day.
I need to unmute myself first. I'm guessing you guys can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Again, thank you guys for taking the time. I think the good news is we don't have too much in the way of new information today. It's really just sort of revisiting some of what I know Candace has shared with you in the past, what I've had a chance to share with you, as well as Tara. And I just kind of want to touch base on some of these items again, but really more in the context of what's coming up, which will be the non-competitive continuation awards for year 3 of your respective grants. Of course, Daisy, you're the exception. In Albuquerque, you guys would be going into year 2. And I just want to revisit some of these items, and here's why. We've shared with you guys the significant number of transitions that have been occurring here within the Office of Indian Education. And we are very excited to have our new director, Angeline Boley, on board. That said, we also are really challenged, and I know you guys can probably relate, definitely relate actually, to our limited capacity right now. And I want to be really transparent and share that we have 2 staff including myself, in the working on 4 different discretionary grant programs. And so what that means is that really cuts down our time and ability to carry out sort of one-on-one conversations with, again, having an up-to-date understanding of really where you are in your projects. And it's why, at least in the case of the Native American Language Grant Program, I feel a lot of relief because we have the Synergy team that we know has been charged to work with you, provide you support. They provide us with and are able to report back to us the progress of your work and the updates on the activities that you guys have been carrying out, as well as the ongoing challenges in implementing any grant program. So I just want you guys all to be aware that I do ask, I'm getting this information. It is the information I'm sharing with our leadership as we begin to make those decisions around year 3 grant awards. So I want to kind of talk through, that's, we also talked about, let me back up and just remind you all that Candace shared prior to her departure the fact that we would be using your APR data that was completed in the fall really as a primary measure of progress in terms of project implementation, and that does not change. And given that, besides that performance reporting, that narrative work, really what I'm looking to focus on over the next month or 2 is really having a much more comprehensive understanding of your financial management situation and your status, and why things look the way they look. And when I say why things look the way they look, you and I both know that I'm looking in G5 to observe things like the drawdown rate, the amounts that are getting drawn down, and the extent to which they are consistent and aligned to the rate of activity that you have been, that you propose to carry out. As we all know, and we've all kind of been through different degrees of this challenge, G5 drawdown rates often don't reflect the work that you really are doing in real time. It's why last month when I sent out an email notifying those of you that had very high balances, available funds in G5, letting you know, hey, G5 is not reflecting that you're drawing down. It raises flags for individuals, not me, but individuals who are part of the decision-making process in awarding you continuation grants, who don't know your day-to-day and who frankly rely heavily on that financial data to make informed decisions about the readiness of your receiving a full year 3 continuation award. So I really want to emphasize here, it becomes extremely, extremely, extremely important. And I'm going to talk about ways for you to share this back with me. It becomes extremely important for you to be able to share with me proactively the rationale for why your activity is occurring, but we're not seeing the drawdown rate really align. We know it is not real time. We know that there are delays, but that said, with almost 2 years under your belt of program period, there is clear expectation that there should be at least a year of activity and corresponding drawdown being reflected. Again, even if you're doing just a quarterly drawdown, we should be able to see a quarterly drawdown that's reflective of prior quarter's worth of work, and not, for example, $100 here or $100 there as the cumulative amounts being drawn down. We've also pointed to the grant award notification attachments that you receive every year and the explanation and the guidance that the department sends you with respect to cost principles, cash management, and the expectation for obligating funds on a consistent manner, consistent with your activities that you are carrying out. So again, we understand that it's not and we do not have the expectation that you are drawing down every week or even every month. At a minimum, we do expect to see a quarterly drawdown rate reflected. I've shared this before, and I'll share it again. Our G5 system does automatically generate a flag for any grant that has high balances and for which few drawdowns have been made, meaning less than on a quarterly basis. When those reports are generated and automatically flagged, those reports travel across the department, meaning it's not just our program doing this, it's department-wide. And it has impact because people start asking questions that are outside of the program office that know far less about your progress. And it requires that we are being able to report the rationale for why your drawdown rate looks the way it does. So I want to really implore the importance of you providing rationale for why the drawdown, why the available balance, why the expenditures or lack thereof look the way they look in your G5 grant account. And as project directors on record, that is your responsibility to do so. Next slide, Sarah. So the top 3 musts, right, is when you do draw down the funds, ensuring you're drawing them down for obligations you actually have already made and that you're ready to pay, and remembering to use those funds within 3 working days, 3 business days. You want to make sure that you're not earning interest on those. Otherwise, it creates additional unnecessary work for yourself and your finance staff. Again, the expectation is that you're obligating all funds that you can possibly obligate for allowable approved costs in a timely manner. Next step, next slide. So some fiscal guidance. I think you guys know from the year prior, and I think Candace's guidance was similar in that carryover does not need to be quote unquote approved. The carryover was reflected in your G5 balance. You as grantees have the flexibility to move those costs across line items with some caveats. So of course they have to be used for the original approved purpose intended, meaning you can't suddenly say, I want to use this for 50 iPads when you had your original budget reduced because you proposed 50 iPads and they weren't approved. I'm completely making that up, but I think you guys know where I'm going. The other expectation is, it makes perfect sense to say, we want to use carryover to ramp up this area where we have fallen behind or where we under budgeted. That is perfectly okay. I think at this point, at this stage in the game, at this point in your grants, the expectation is that you are moving well beyond, fact finding and understanding of what a program should look like, and that most, if not all, resources are really going into one, your time, the time of other coordinators or key staff that are helping to actually implement and move the project, meaning the people who are responsible for developing the curriculum or the activities that you had originally proposed and were approved for, and or developing and working on the entire assessment process from start to finish. However great or small that the assessments are for your respective programs. But the data piece is really key, and ensuring valid and reliable data means that you're really spending a lot of resources to support that process and a sound process with integrity. So just know that you do have that flexibility to move that over. I think the real-time concern I have is seeing select really high balances. And I think you all know who you are when you have really high balances. It's just a matter of fact that we see that as a sign of increased risk. It's a factor. And given that we are moving into the final year 3 of the grant for 5 of the 6 of you, the expectation is that you really have a coherent plan for how you're going to use carryover to the extent that you have it. You expect to have it by September 30 of this year. Next slide. So again, I think it's really, frankly, beyond the time to start having a conversation with your fiscal office. My hope is that you've been having these fiscal office conversations about what you need to do to get it on track. And absent that, we're going to talk about shortly what you can do to help sort of, again, provide that rationale and give the feedback that we need to be able to justify why your budget might look the way it looks today. Next slide. So just a reminder, again, this is just a point of reference to the GAN attachments I was talking about, where we spell out what the expectation is for all discretionary grantees around key financial management requirements. And that does include that quarterly G5 drawdown. Next slide. So again, the budget revisions. When is the revision needed? When you are considering, excuse me, I have to turn my light back on, any project activities and/or partners, or any significant changes that you are not quite sure it's going to be a change in scope. So something I'm happy to talk about with you and try to figure out the best course of action to help you do what you need to get done. And then if there's a significant change, meaning if you're talking about a really huge chunk of money that you're trying to move, whether across one or more budget categories, let's have a conversation about it. And again, it's really more of a brainstorm, and I'm here really to be your thought partner in that process. So it's not to know or mandate what you should do, it's to give you some options, and I'm happy to do that. And again, just working with your finance office to see what you can do about trying to ensure that quarterly drawdown rate. Next slide. So again, you use your original budget narrative format from your application. To the extent you need to give me a budget revision, I'm only asking for the current year, meaning whatever's remaining for the rest of this year. If you do need to do a revision now, you can send it to me, of course, and we here have the bullets of what we would expect that you're including, and I'm going to talk in a minute about ways that you can share that with us. Next slide. So am I turning that over to you now, Sarah?
Sure. I can kind of review what's in this chart. And I think many of you saw this chart when we had our session in December. This is the same chart that we looked at then. And it's really just summarizing year one. And Daisy, you are not on here since you are in year one currently. But for the rest of us who are in year two, you can see in the kind of eggplant color that is how much money was drawn down officially in year one. So this information was taken from G5 October 1st. So it fully encompasses the fiscal year. And then the golden color is the amount of monies that were left at the end of year one. So that was carryover into year two. And so when Angela was touching upon the large amounts of carryover and how that's kind of a red flag to the department, then just something to kind of be aware of. And then as we move to our next slide, this is our year-to-date expenditures. So this information is as of this morning. So the most up-to-date information. And again, this is what's in G5. So those of you who have already requested the G5 view-only budget access, you're able to go in and actually see this information up to date. For those of you who have not requested that access yet, you should be able to get this information from your budget office to be able to keep up to date with what has actually been drawn down from G5 versus expended or obligated within your actual program. And so same thing here, where as of this morning, you can see the eggplant color is how much of your monies have been drawn down versus that golden color, how much you still have remaining. And so this is, again, just the G5 amount, not necessarily what you've actually expended there locally. But this is what the department is able to see and is therefore the fiscal picture painted in G5.
So I mentioned over a couple of slides, thank you, Sarah. I mentioned over a couple of slides ago that we wanted to give you a way to talk about and share with us, with our office and with me and with our leadership, both inside and outside of OIE, the rationale for why things might look the way they look. Now, I know you guys might have gotten some budget charts that I'm about to share with you that look similar as in the past. And we really want to build on really having a clear and transparent picture for what things look like in different snapshots and giving you the opportunity to explain why. As I walk through this form today, I really want to underscore this is not, let me repeat, it is not a required form. That said, if you have a high balance remaining in your grant, if I do not get this form and or very similar data in a narrative form from you, I am subject to looking and being able to only refer to the information that I extract from G5, which really, realistically, is simply the data that Sarah just shared with you in illustrative form, in graphic form. So I would ask, as we walk over this through this budget status and projected carryover costs, that you strongly consider populating this chart and sharing it back and providing some narrative. And that will really go a long way to helping us understand the reasons why we might see what we see in G5 and probably explain away what might be the lack of reflection of expenditures that might not just be evident yet in that system. Next slide. So this next slide, I just want to walk through briefly each of these columns. They're pretty self-evident, and where they're not, we have a little explanatory row that explains exactly what we're looking for. So our budget categories, our federal budget categories. The second column you see is approved budget. These figures, that figure should reflect the sum of your year one carryover funds and what you were awarded for year two. So your whole cumulative award as of October 1, 2018 would be what you would be listing there. The next column would be all expenditures for which you've encumbered and actually drawn down from G5 between 10/1/18 and 3/31/19. So a few days from now. We would want that to be reflected. And so that snapshot would be you taking note account of G5 drawdowns and as of 3/31 what's been drawn down. Then you would see, then we would ask you to, in this next column, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure if everybody has a mute button that you can press or *6. In the next column, we have expenditures not yet drawn down from G5. So this is really a key opportunity here in column 4 for you to document by federal budget category what expenditures you've made that you know are not yet reflected in G5. My hope is that for some of you anyway, those would be some pretty huge amounts in order to account for the extremely high balances that remain. The following column, the 5th column, available funds, would be the difference between column B and the sum of columns C and D. So that should amount, and that will auto-calculate. That's a formula-based column, so you should not be trying to go in and populate that manually. That should auto-calculate based on what you've entered in the prior columns. You see in the next column an opportunity for your narrative. I'm fine if you know you have more to explain, you using a separate sheet as opposed to using that column, but that's your call, whatever you think, whatever space you think you need to explain the reason for the available funds. Then you see in the next column, anticipated to be spent by 9/30/19. So of those available funds that were auto-calculated in column E, we would be asking for, what do you expect to also be expending and if not, and or drawing down from G5 by 9/30/19, by the end of this budget period. And then that would auto-calculate your projected carryover into year 3 based on what you might still have left even after you enter your projected costs through the end of this budget period. The final column, and again, it's more of a narrative column, and it is a narrative column, and I certainly have no problem with you also using a separate form if it's easier than writing a narrative in these boxes, in these cells, for you to just describe what you would use that projected carryover for, to the extent you would plan to use it in year 3. So again, in a nutshell, this gives us just sort of, soup to nuts, a real quick overview, snapshot of these various stages in your expenditures process, where you are, where you expect to be, and to the extent that you know you will have carryover, how you would anticipate using it in year 3. Again, this is not a required document. I want to say that again, not required. However, without that information, and should you have a high balance, I will have only G5 activity to go on. So this is not mandated. It's just very strongly encouraged. And it really helps us also help you. And so just know that it's not just a matter of us receiving it and just making arbitrary decisions here. This is really important for you to, and an opportunity for you to inform us of what your ongoing challenges and opportunities are to accelerate expenditure rate. And it's something where I anticipate if I see opportunity for you to improve upon that situation or ways to think through with you effective ways of using your funds in an allowable and reasonable way, I'm going to be reaching out to you proactively. So this really is an opportunity and a place to gather some potential discussion points amongst you and me. One other point here that I would expect everybody, meaning all of you, even if all of you used your funds or plan to use your funds through the end of September, as we all know, we have not had an in-person project directors meeting. So as a quick example, I would expect if Grantee X used all of their funds, I would still expect to see some travel funds remaining available, because we have not and will not have a project directors meeting before the end of this fiscal year. And so I really want to encourage you now, I just want to share now, please feel free to repurpose those funds that you have set aside for travel to a project directors meeting for year 2. For most of you, that's Albuquerque, that would be year 1. Please feel free to repurpose those funds accordingly and make them useful for any other allowable cost for which you were already approved. So feel free to shift those funds. Again, for year 2 only. We do hope and anticipate that we will have an opportunity to convene with you in person in year 3. I would like, and yes, Sarah, I'm going to ask that Synergy staff, if you can put this and make this document available right now for download at the end of the event, that would be great. And we'll also be sending it out after the meeting. Okay. I'm going to pause here, and if we can just stay on this slide for a second, Sarah, I just want to see if there are any questions about the data that is being solicited here in this document, if there's anything that's not clear to anybody.
And if you do have questions, the buttons have moved on you. So if you're trying to unmute yourself, instead of going to the bottom of your screen, you're now going to go to the top left of your screen. And that's where your unmute button has moved. If you'd like to holler out a question. If you are having any audio difficulties, you can also go to that chat. It should be to the far right at the top of your screen. There's 3 little buttons that say more, and the very first option is chat. So you're also welcome to type in your question either way.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to keep us moving, and if we hear anybody pop up or see any chat questions, we'll certainly pause to respond, and I'll just ask you to prompt me, Sarah, if you see anything that I missed.
Absolutely.
Next slide. So our discussion, I think that's all we have beyond that, right? Outside of a thank you. So,
yes. And one thing that I wanted to quickly point out is the form that we were just sharing on the screen, I know looks extremely similar to the form that you used for your APR and end of year reporting last year, but do not use that old form. This form, while very similar, does have some different things in it. So you'll want to make sure and use this new updated form, and it'll be in the chat box momentarily, as well as we'll send it out after. But just because they do look so similar, not to confuse the two, this is a new updated document. And we do have our first question. Can we obtain this spreadsheet as an Excel document for reference and or use?
yes, is the short answer. You'll get this definitely in Excel format, so you can type right into it and save it as your own. And again, it should be already locked and set up with auto calculations for some of those columns so that you're not having to manually do it yourself. And we ask that you not try to break it and open or unlock those, just to make it easier both for yourselves and us. The other thing I want to note as well, I mentioned where you might not be meeting the rate of spending, or G5 is not reflecting what you're doing. Also know that for those of you guys I have spoken to, guys or women, but I've spoken to about sort of the rate not being reflected in G5, and I know you guys are doing activities. I would tell you, if you can just briefly in your narrative reiterate what we've talked about on the phone, and that's perfectly fine. So, we're not looking for extensive, 3-page narratives on this. I'm looking for very concise feedback on, here's what we know we're doing, here's what we expected to do and can't do, and here's what we still want to do, but it's going to have to be delayed until next year. Whatever those are. Again, there's different, reasons and whatnot. And it's okay to say, we just don't have enough people to do this. We haven't had the time. Any rationale is better than none. I can promise you that. So there is no wrong answer. There is no bad answer. The only bad answer is no answer. So I think it's helpful for lots of reasons to give us realistic pictures of what the work entails and what it takes to put on a good, high quality program. And we know it takes time. Certainly as a result, as a function of hearing what a lot of our experts have shared with you guys and us. But I think hearing it from you and hearing what's working and what's not, and what you would do differently is certainly helpful. So just want to throw that out there.
And I'll let everybody know that document is in the chat box, so you can download it from there. And like I said, we'll also send it out after, but if you'd like to get access to it now, it's in the chat box. And we have our next question. It had been explained to us that we could not move prior year budgeted monies across categories. Is that incorrect?
When you say you cannot, it's sort of circumstantial. I'd have to know the situation that you're calling out specifically. And again, I'll go back to, in general, if somebody has said, no, you can't do X, again, the only reason I can think of them saying absolutely not is, one, because it's not allowable under the program, or two, it's because you're asking to put money right back where we reduced it for some reason at time of initial award. But if you have some questions and want to have a conversation about it, I'm more than happy to do that. So I hope that's helpful.
Any other questions? And as you begin working through that document, if you have questions or would like assistance, you can reach out to Angela, as well as I'm happy to schedule some time, and we can always work on that as well. So lots of opportunities for support.
Yes, and let me add to that as well, Sarah. as a point of information for folks, I think we've shared with you all that in fact next week we expect to hold a tribal consultation on site on what would be next year's competition for the Native American language program in Michigan. And so that is going to occur on Thursday of next week. And I share that for two reasons. One is because I want to remind people I would certainly love to have your participation and your feedback on the proposed concepts and approaches. A lot of it's being informed by the opportunities and challenges that you guys have all experienced over the last couple of years. So, and just hearing, even if you don't share at the time of tribal consultation, any feedback and recommendations or opinions on what was shared and being proposed for new priorities and requirements and rules is certainly useful. And you guys would be a primary audience for that. So I just encourage that. But I also share that the second reason, which is it means that I'm out of pocket and on travel for the better part of next week, the latter half of the week. And so I would just ask if you do want to set up time, if we don't do it on Monday, I will ask you to go to Sarah. And Sarah, I'm also happy when you hear the feedback, if it's something we need to set up, I'm going to be sending Sarah some times in advance for us to set up some calls for the following week to make sure that I'm available to address any concerns. Okay? All right.
All right. So we're nearing the end of our time. We're happy to answer any further questions that anybody might have, and we'll stay on the line to be able to do that. But we're also going to go ahead and put our feedback survey link up in the chat box, particularly because you do have a few minutes in the time that you allotted to spend with us today. We would love if while you're still on the line with us, if you would click that link, and the survey should take, we've kind of pared down the questions, so it should take approximately 3 minutes to complete that, and we really appreciate that feedback. It really helps us as we plan our upcoming technical assistance activities and making sure that those are as useful and pertinent for you as possible. So that link is over in the chat box, as well as that document for download. Otherwise, I'll give you a little quiet time as you're completing that survey, but if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in or pop them in the chat box.
Thank you, Sarah.